Hello, my name's Dennis, and this is the fourth in a series of videos on temperament and health. And today we're going to look at the idea of reciprocals. It's good to understand that a temperament is a dynamic between a fixed state of a solid and a liquid and a gas. When a liquid wants to change to a gas, or when we want to change a liquid to a gas, we apply heat. And that changes the moisture into heat. And those qualities of moist, hot, dry, and cold are known as temperaments. And tempering simply means balancing. So a simple way to understand that is, say you go and get a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and you want to add some milk. So you'll take the milk and you'll add the milk and maybe a little more and maybe a little more. What you're trying to do is balance a kind of acidic quality of the tea or coffee with the milk. You are tempering. And then you take your coffee that has been tempered with the milk and you find out it's still too hot, so you blow on it. What you're doing is trying to release some of the heat so that you can put that lovely moisture in your mouth. You're tempering the two elements there. You're tempering the heat. You're tempering the acidity. And tempering simply means I bring two things into a proportional balance that is more useful for me, for what I want to do. And in the ancient world, they often used temperaments and the idea of balancing as a way of understanding how to maintain health. So let's take a closer look at that. Suppose, for instance, we want to see how cold and moist temper into each other. So I'll draw a little arrow here between cold and moist to show that cold is trying to approach moist. And when that happens, the cold and moist come together and they create a condition where something else needs to be added. So if I increase cold and moist, I begin to attract heat. This is a fundamental law of the atmosphere, but it's also what you're doing when you're blowing on your coffee. You're trying to bring some cold and moist there to offset the effects of heat. But in the natural world, a cold, moist lake is attracting sunlight in order that it can go to the next level. So that's a tempering. The cold and the moist together are pulling things down. And in order to keep that part of the dynamic of nature, heat comes into play. So now I have attracted heat into the moisture. So increased moisture and heat automatically begins to move to dryness. So if you just keep warming your coffee and you see the mist rising, the hot mist rising, eventually you're just going to have some dregs in the bottom that are very dry because you've upset the balance between moist and hot. You've increased moist and hot, and that calls into play the quality of dryness. So let's look at dryness now. Bring this one in. Suppose I increase the heat and the dryness. They come together. Increased hot and dry produces cold and dry ash. Here we get a kind of interesting relationship. If you take the coffee idea and you get rid of all the moisture in there, you're left with dregs. And if you keep heating that, those dregs will volatilize and turn to an ash. They become cold and dry. So hot and dry produces cold and dry ash. And once I get ashes that are dry and cold, I have increased that quality of the temperaments, and I need to bring something into them in order to temper or balance them. So increased cold and dry then attracts moist. So we've made a circle. Increased cold and moist attracts hot. Increased moist and hot moves to dryness. Increased hot and dry produces cold, dry ash. The ash falls down. Increased cold, dry ash attracts moisture. This is balancing or tempering with reciprocals. Now suppose I took the heat away and said there is no heat in this process. So I'll move the heat out, and I'll move the heat out there. What will happen is anything that was caught up in the idea of hot will start to fall back into moisture. And if I take the moisture, and let's move that to the side, I could say then whatever is moist is moving and settling like the dew or like fog down into the cold. If I take the hot away, I no longer have the influence of the dry, and the cold takes over, and I can now take that one away. And I'm back in the mandala, but I see that because I've drawn the arrows here, that I can go from cold to moist, or moist to cold, from cold to dry, from dry to cold. These are reciprocals, or reciprocation. And the hallmark of working with the mandala of the temperaments is reciprocation. This is an ancient symbol of rotation. So the elements here in this symbol are, we see a cross, and then the little balloons are showing the direction this is moving in a clockwise motion. Always when things in the ancient world, you can find this very much on altars, this symbol. It is a symbol of the changes in the elemental and temperamental world. So this was reciprocals. And now we have a lot that we can work with to look at how these ideas work in biology. Thank you for watching.